The wine left her hand in slow motion, a dark arc against crystal chandeliers, and Leonora knew exactly where it would land before it did. The woman in the white Chanel gown, Han Sora, Seoul's most ruthless CEO, stood 3 feet away mid-sentence with a cluster of executives, and the wine struck her like a blood stain across snow. Red bloomed through white silk, spreading across her chest, her stomach, her hip, and the entire ballroom went silent. 500 witnesses, 500 phones lifting, 500 people watching the only black woman in the room destroy her entire mission in a single spilled glass. Sora looked down at the ruined fabric, then lifted her gaze to Leonora. Her face stayed smooth, controlled, perfect, but her eyes made a promise that felt like a threat. Security in black suits began moving through the crowd, their focus locked on Leonora. She calculated exits, corridors, how fast she could move before hands closed around her arms. This was the end of everything. 6 months of planning, 6 months of fake credentials and careful research, 6 months building toward one painting hanging on the east wall, and it was over. Then a voice cut through the silence, calm and unbothered. "I'm terribly sorry. That was entirely my fault." The crowd parted like water, and a man stepped between Leonora and consequence. A charcoal suit that cost more than most people owned. He moved with a kind of ease that made space rearrange itself around him. He reached Sora in 4 measured steps and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. I stepped back without looking and knocked the server. The glass slipped. Completely my responsibility. Please send me the cleaning invoice. It was a lie so obvious that everyone within 10 feet knew it instantly. Leonora had been nowhere near him, but the way he delivered it, steady and certain, made challenging him feel improper. Sora's face went smooth and unreadable, which felt more dangerous than anger. When she spoke, her voice was polished steel. "How careless of you, Jung." The use of his first name, intimate and weighted, told Leonora more than she wanted to know. Jung. The name crashed through Leonora's research-trained mind. Tech magnate, Industries, semiconductors, and venture capital, one of the largest private art collections in South Korea, and divorced from Hansora 5 years ago. Jung angled his body slightly and extended a hand toward Leonora without touching her. "Please, allow me to escort you somewhere more comfortable. You must be shaken." His hand hovered near the small of her back, close enough for every camera to catch it, close enough to read as protection without crossing any line. He was giving her cover while making his claim unmistakable. Every survival instinct told Leonora to refuse, to step away, to avoid being pulled into whatever unfinished war sat between these two people. But the mission spoke louder. Industries, the collection, the placard beneath the painting had named it clearly. This man was connected to the work she came for. He might be the door she needed. So she nodded, wordless, and let him steer her through the parting crowd. Behind them, Sora remained still in her stained gown. Leonora glanced back once and saw something pass behind that perfect expression. Not rage, but something colder, recognition. As if Sora had just solved a problem she hadn't realized she was working on. Then she smiled. "Let's go back 6 hours. Before the wine, before the lie, before everything shattered." Leonora Blackwood stood in her small Itaewon apartment, 6th floor walk-up, overlooking a convenience store and a street that never slept, staring at a photograph worn thin from handling. Her mother, Octavian Blackwood, in a cramped Brixton studio, paint staining her fingers, optimism bright across her face. Behind her on the easel, still drying, the canvas glowed with impossible light. "Morning in Jeju, March 1993." Written in her mother's slanted hand on the back. 1 year before an anonymous Korean artist was supposed to have created it. Leonora had spent 6 months building her cover as an art authentication consultant, 6 months of manufactured credentials and curated references. all to get into the Korean-British Art Relations Summit at the Shilla Hotel, all to stand close enough to that painting to prove what her body already knew, that her mother's name had been erased, sealed beneath varnish and time and a careful campaign of forgetting. Octavian Blackwood died in October 1995, 2 months after Leonora turned 4, liver failure, the certificate said. But Leonora had found the rest years later when she was old enough to search. Eviction notices, debt collection letters, the paper trail of a woman working 3 jobs while trying to paint, convinced her work had no value because no gallery would hang it. She died believing she had failed, except someone had paid for it. Someone had seen the work, understood its worth, bought it, and likely profited. They had just removed her name first. Leonora pressed the photograph to her chest and whispered the promise she made every morning. "I will make them say it, Mama. I will make them say your name so loudly, the world cannot ignore it." Now, hours later, Jung guided her through a side door she had completely missed, down a corridor lined with museum-grade artwork, into a private room built for crisis containment. Leather chairs, soundproof walls, a bar stocked with bottles that probably cost more than rent. He shut the door, and the ballroom noise vanished. Leonora's heart was trying to climb out of her chest. She forced her spine straight, met his gaze, refused to reveal how violently she was shaking. "Thank you for intervening, but you really didn't have to lie for me." Jung crossed to the bar, poured 2 glasses of water without asking, and returned with movements that were deliberate and controlled. "I believe people should be granted second chances for beautiful mistakes." The phrase hit harder than she expected. Beautiful mistakes. As if he understood it hadn't been pure accident, as if he had noticed her fixation on the painting, her distraction, her failure to track her surroundings. "Why?" she asked. "Why? Help me." Jung lowered himself into one of the leather chairs as though the room had been designed around him. "Because Han Sora is my former wife, and I have developed a habit of absorbing fallout around her." He hesitated, and something softened beneath the polish. "And because you were looking at mourning in Jeju the way people look at hauntings." The glass almost slipped from Leonora's grasp. He had seen her. She reached for her cover. The explanation drilled into her until it sounded natural. "It's an extraordinary work. The light, the structure, it feels unusually advanced for an unsigned artist." "Yes," Jung said, still studying her. "It is." Silence settled between them. Then Jung made a call, spoke Korean too fast for her limited grasp, and slid a card from his wallet. "My driver will take you wherever you need. If tonight causes you any trouble at all, contact me directly." The card was thick, embossed. Aum Jung, CEO, Aum Industries. A personal number, handwritten on the reverse. "I can handle myself," Leonora said, though she took it anyway. "I have no doubt," Jung replied. "But this is Seoul. Different terrain, different rules, different consequences. And you have just drawn the attention of the second most powerful woman in that ballroom." "Who's the first?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Jung smiled, sorrowful and strange. "That depends entirely on perspective." 20 minutes later, Leonora sat in the back of a Genesis sedan worth more than 3 years of tuition, moving through Seoul's neon-lit streets beside a driver who hadn't spoken once. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. "Did you confirm it?" The voice was altered, flattened by software, into something mechanical. Leonora glanced toward the driver's silhouette, then spoke softly. "Yes, it's hers. The brushwork, the palette, everything. It's Octavian's." They sealed her signature under varnish. "Good," the voice paused. "But you were seen by Aum Jung of all people. Do you understand how severely you've compromised the operation?" "It wasn't my fault," Leonora began. "Fault is irrelevant. What matters is that the son of the man who took your mother's work now knows you exist. Prepare for phase 2. And be cautious. The Aum family doesn't offer protection without intent." The call ended. Leonora pulled out the photograph again, Her mother caught mid-laugh at something just outside the frame. Behind her, on the easel, still wet and undeniably hers, Morning in Jeju. She whispered to the image, "I will make them say it, Mama. I promise." Across the city, inside a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the Han River into a strip of light below, Sora stood in her wine-stained Chanel and watched the security footage for the 8th time. Her assistant, Yoon Da-hee, 29 and sharp-eyed, waited nearby with a tablet. Sora paused the video at the moment Jung's hand hovered near Leonora's back. His posture, the way his body angled toward the woman, the fleeting expression on his face. "He never touched me like that," Sora said quietly. "Not once. Not in 15 years. "Ma'am," Da-hee said carefully. It appeared to be a courtesy. He was preventing escalation. "No." Sora stepped closer to the screen, refusing to change out of the stained dress, needing the discomfort sharp enough to sharpen her thinking. Watch his hand. He never actually touches her, but the placement, the distance, that's intimate. That's familiarity. "You don't move like that with a stranger." Da-hee was already pulling up another screen. "I ran the initial background check. Leonora Blackwood, 32, British national, Caribbean heritage, through her mother. Art authentication consultant, currently freelance, formerly with Sotheby's London. Her credentials are legitimate." "Then look into her personal history," Sora said. "Where was she raised? Who were her parents? Why is she in Seoul now? And what exactly was she looking at before the spill?" "Ma'am, is this really warranted?" Da-hee asked carefully. The woman spilled wine by accident. She was visibly shaken. Sora laughed, sharp and humorless. "You don't know Jung the way I do. He doesn't shield strangers. He doesn't publicly absorb blame. I spent 15 years married to that man, watching him measure every decision. Do you know what he did the night investors ridiculed my first collection?" Da-hee stayed silent, knowing this story. "We'd been married 3 years," Sora went on. "I was 29, trying to rebuild my family's name from nothing. I poured everything into that line. And those men, the investors Jung needed, spent an hour tearing it apart, said it looked like cheap copies, joked about whether I learned to sew in a factory." She paused. "I was standing right there. Jung was beside me, and he said nothing, not a single word. He smiled and laughed along because their money mattered more than my dignity." The penthouse filled with heavy silence. "And yet tonight," Sora said, turning back to the frozen image, "tonight he steps in front of a stranger, claims fault, draws attention, risks his standing. Why? For her. What makes her different?" Da-hee began typing. "I'll have a full background dossier by morning." "No," Sora said. "I want it in 3 hours. And pull the acquisition records for the painting she was focused on. Morning in Jeju. I want to know its full provenance. When my former father-in-law acquired it, everything. You think the woman and the painting are connected?" Sora smiled, the same smile she used in boardrooms before dismantling someone's quarter. "I think Jung knows something I don't, and I think I'm about to find out." 2 days passed. Leonora maintained her cover, attended a gallery opening in Gangnam, exchanged pleasantries with mid-tier dealers who barely skimmed her portfolio. No one mentioned the gala, which meant it had been discussed exhaustively elsewhere. She was in her apartment when the invitation arrived, placed neatly on her doormat. Cream cardstock, heavy, her name written in calligraphy that cost more than her rent. "Leonora Blackwood, you are cordially invited to a private viewing of the Eom collection at the Bukhansan Estate. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock, transportation will be arranged." No signature, just the embossed emblem, Eom Industries. Leonora read it 3 times. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. "Don't go," the distorted voice said. "It's too obvious." "Or, it's exactly what I need," Leonora shot back. "The Eom collection is where the other works would be. That's where the authentication records are kept. He knows who you are, the voice sharpened. He knows what you're searching for. This is bait. Then I'll walk carefully, Leonora said, and ended the call. The Genesis sedan arrived precisely at 6:30 the following evening. The drive climbed into Seoul's northern hills, past neighborhoods where homes carried names instead of numbers, until they reached an estate that felt like power, rendered into architecture. Traditional Korean rooflines blended into walls of glass. Gardens spilled down the slope. Below, the city glowed. Jung greeted her at the entrance in relaxed linen that somehow made him feel more dangerous. Miss Blackwood, I appreciate you accepting my invitation. Thank you for offering it, Leonora replied, stepping into an entry hall anchored by a sculpture worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Though I wasn't certain you'd wish to see me again after the disruption. The disruption occurred around you, Jung said mildly. That's not the same as disruption you caused. Come, let me show you what draws me to collecting. He guided her through rooms that felt like curated art history. A Rothko that stole her breath, a Basquiat she'd only seen in texts, Korean masters like Park Seo-bo and Lee Bae displayed beside European modernists. Jung spoke about each work with unguarded enthusiasm, nothing like the strategic coldness she expected. Then they entered the East Wing Gallery, and Leonora stopped breathing. 3 paintings, large, oil on canvas, colors vivid enough to feel alive. She recognized them instantly. She'd seen their early sketches in her mother's notebooks, read notes about pigments and balance. 1993, every one of them. All 3 labeled Anonymous Korean Artist, 1993 to 94. All 3 unmistakably her mother's work. Leonora's vision wavered. Her hands curled tight at her sides. You have an exceptional eye, Jung said softly. What do you see when you look at these? Light, Leonora said, barely managing sound. The artist understood light in a way that was decades ahead of their time. My father acquired these from a private seller in London in '94, Jung continued. He told me the artist died unknown, never realized what the work was worth, never experienced any recognition. The precision of it, the quiet brutality, nearly broke her. That was exactly how her mother had died, thinking she'd failed. Never knowing her paintings had been taken, renamed, folded into collections that made other people rich. That's devastating, Leonora breathed. Yes, Jung said, it is. He stepped closer. I know why you came to Korea, Miss Blackwood. I know who you are. I know what my father did, and I've been searching for you for 18 months. The room seemed to tilt. Every instinct screamed, run, but her legs stayed rooted because Jung had just spoken the impossible, searching for you. 18 months. Which meant he'd known from the moment she entered the gala, known when he took the blame, known when he placed her in his car. How, she said, voice rough with anger. How do you know who I am? Jung crossed to a leather chair and sat. Because 3 years ago, my father died, and I spent 6 months cataloging his estate. Corporate ledgers, acquisition records, private correspondence. And I found something that made me understand the collection I'd been proud of was founded on theft. He took out his phone, tapped the screen, handed it to her. A scanned contract, edges yellowed, dated December 1993. Leonora recognized the name before her thoughts caught up. Octavian Blackwood, sale of 4 original works. Total compensation, £500. Her hands trembled as she scrolled. The document looked official, properly executed. Then she reached the second page, an addendum. In exchange for additional financial assistance, the undersigned agrees to relinquish all future rights, attribution, and reproduction claims to EOM Industries in perpetuity. Signed, again, Octavian Blackwood. Additional financial assistance, Leonora read aloud, voice empty. How much? Jung's expression didn't change. £1,500 total for 4 paintings and complete ownership of her body of work. £2,000 altogether. Her mother had sold her entire future for £2,000 because she was desperate, pregnant, and alone. She was 6 months pregnant with you, Jung said quietly. I found clinic receipts in my father's files, prenatal care in Brixton. He framed it as generosity, while he stripped her of everything. Why tell me? Leonora whispered. Why not stay silent? Keep the paintings, let it remain buried. Because my father built his reputation on stolen brilliance, and I've spent 18 months trying to figure out how to make it right, he leaned forward. The problem is his will. He was paranoid about the collection being challenged after his death, so he built in a safeguard. If anyone successfully disputes provenance, the entire collection transfers to a foundation he established. A foundation run by people who have every reason to bury the truth. So you can't just give the paintings back, Leonora said, not without ironclad legal proof that bypasses the will's conditions. I need documentation that your mother created these works before she sold them. Preliminary sketches, dated photographs, journal entries, anything that establishes prior creation. Do you have anything like that? Leonora thought of the journals in her London flat, 3 decades of her mother's process in cramped handwriting and small sketches. Yes, I have her journals, all of them. Then let me help you, Jung said, force in his voice. Let me fly you to London. We'll get the documentation, build an airtight legal case. We'll restore your mother's name the right way, permanently, so no one can erase her again. For the first time since walking into this house, Leonora felt something other than fury. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of trust, which felt more dangerous. Why does this matter to you? Because I'm tired of inheriting my father's sins, Jung said simply, and because your mother deserved better than obscurity. The moment stretched between them. Then, Leonora's phone buzzed. 7 missed calls from the unknown number. A text, in all caps. Get out now. He's lying. It's a trap. She looked at Jung, at his open face, at the paintings behind him that were unmistakably her mother's work. She made a choice. Okay, she said. I'm in. But across the city, Sora was reading a very different story. Dahi had delivered the background report exactly 3 hours after being asked. Read this section again, Sora said, pointing to highlighted text. Dahi cleared her throat. Octavian Blackwood, born 1968, in Kingston, Jamaica. Immigrated to London, 1987. Mixed media artist, primarily oil painting. In December 1993, she sold several works to EOM Industries through an intermediary. She died October 1995 of liver failure. She paused. She left behind one daughter, Leonora Blackwood, born June 1993, and the paintings in Jung's collection, Sora Prompted. Acquired December 93 through March 94 from a London seller, artist listed as anonymous. But if you compare the brushwork and color composition to known samples of Octavian Blackwood's work, Dahi pulled images onto her tablet. The similarities are significant. They're the same artist, Sora said flatly. Jung's father bought this woman's paintings for nothing, stripped her name away, and sold them as anonymous Korean works for a fortune. And now her daughter is in Seoul, and my ex-husband is protecting her. The question is, why? Dahi offered. Is he trying to make amends? Bury it? Use her somehow? Sora stood, walked to the windows, watched Seoul glitter below like a grid of ambition and money. She thought about 15 years of marriage to a man who measured every move, who weighed every relationship for strategic return. Then she thought about the way he'd touched Leonora's back at the gala. Protective, instant, uncalculated. He's trying to correct his father's mistake, Sora said quietly. He's going to help her. That's actually kind of admirable, Dahi said. Sora's laugh was sharp as broken glass. You didn't see him stay quiet while investors humiliated me. You didn't watch him choose business over defending his wife for 15 years. But a stranger whose mother was cheated 30 years ago, for her, he turns into a hero. She turned back to Dahi. I want to know everything they're planning. Everything. Ma'am, how? Dahi, Sora said with patience. You've been my executive assistant for 7 years. You have access to every surveillance tool we use for corporate intelligence. Use them. That's illegal if they're not our corporate targets. Then don't tell me how you get the information, Sora said. Just get it. Before we move forward, I want to say something quickly. If you're still watching at this point, if you've stayed with Leonora and her mother's stolen legacy, and you're wondering how this ends, hit that subscribe button right now. Because I guarantee you don't want to lose track of this channel and spend 20 minutes later trying to remember the name. One click, half a second, and you'll never miss a story like this again. Do it now while you're thinking about it. The next 48 hours moved fast. Leonora flew back to London on a private jet, retrieved her mother's journals from the safe deposit box where she'd kept them for years, and flew back to Seoul with documentation that would ruin the Aom family's reputation if it went public. Jung had his legal team working non-stop, building a case that would survive any challenge. They worked late into the night in his Gangnam office, Leonora translating her mother's artistic notes while lawyers drafted motions. And somewhere in those long nights, something shifted between them. The way Jung listened when Leonora talked about her mother, really listened as if her grief counted. The way Leonora caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, something in his expression that had nothing to do with legal strategy. The moment their hands brushed, reaching for the same document, and neither of them pulled away right away. We should go to London, file the claim at the High Court there, Jung said on the third night, both of them exhausted and running on coffee. British law will be more favorable for establishing prior creation. Leonora's phone rang. Unknown number. She'd been ignoring calls from that number for days, but something made her answer. Airport, the distorted voice said. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. Don't tell anyone, especially not Eom. Who is this? Leonora demanded, but the line was already dead. Everything okay? Jung asked. Leonora forced a smile. Fine, just my aunt checking in. They booked flights to London for the next evening. Leonora went back to her apartment to pack, and she should have noticed things were slightly off, that her suitcase wasn't quite where she'd left it. But she was tired and hopeful and beginning to trust, which made her careless. At Incheon Airport the next evening, 30 minutes before their flight was scheduled to board, security stopped them at the gate. Leonora's passport was flagged. So was Jung's. Is there a problem? Jung asked, with the ease of someone who'd never been refused. The security officer, young and clearly uneasy, pulled out a tablet. We have intelligence suggesting you may be attempting to transport stolen cultural artifacts out of Korea. We need to search your luggage. That's absurd, Jung began, but Leonora's stomach was already sinking. They opened her suitcase right there in the terminal, in front of a swelling crowd holding up phones. Beneath her neatly folded clothes were documents she'd never seen before. Authentication certificates from the gallery, loan agreements, all stamped as property of the Korean Cultural Heritage Administration. All absolutely illegal to take out of the country. I didn't. Leonora's voice came out tight. I've never seen these before. I don't know how. The officer was already calling for backup. Ma'am, you're going to need to come with us. Jung's face hardened. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty in his eyes. Calculation. The first flicker of betrayal. This was your plan all along, he said quietly. Steal the authentication documents. Frame me for smuggling. Sell the story to the press. No, Leonora said, panic in her voice. No, Jung, I swear, I don't know how those got there. Someone planted them. Security footage, the officer cut in, bringing up video. Your apartment 2 nights ago. We see you packing these documents. The video showed Leonora's apartment, showed a figure wearing clothes she owned, moving through her space, slipping documents into her suitcase. But the angle was wrong. The face, always just outside the frame. That's not me, Leonora said, but even to her own ears, it sounded thin. They separated them. Jung was released after 2 hours because his lawyers were ruthless. Leonora was kept in a small interrogation room that smelled like disinfectant and fear. The door opened. Leonora expected police, lawyers, immigration. Instead, Dahi stepped inside, closed the door, did something that made the small red light on the ceiling camera blink out. "You have 3 minutes before it comes back on," Dahi said, genuinely shaken. "I'm risking everything by being here. Why are you helping me?" "Because I've spent 7 years watching my boss rot in bitterness, and I'm done being complicit." Dahi pulled out her phone, showed a string of photos. "This is Sora ordering me to plant surveillance equipment in your apartment. This is her instructing me to steal those documents from the gala archives. This is her telling me to put them in your luggage." Leonora felt the air knocked out of her. Sora did this. Why? Dahi's expression tightened. Because the wine spill wasn't an accident. Sora paid the waiter 5 million to bump into you. She'd heard rumors that Jung was searching for someone, an artist's daughter. She wanted to see if he'd protect you the way he never protected her. And when he did, when she watched how fast he moved to shield you, she decided you should both suffer. The room tipped. Everything had been engineered. A test Leonora never agreed to take. "But there's more Sora doesn't know," Dahi went on, voice lowering. "Her mother, Han Jisoo, she was the witness on your mother's contract. The signature that's too smudged to read, that was hers. She worked with Jung's father in the early 90s, brokering art deals in London. She saw exactly how predatory that contract was and signed it anyway." Leonora felt the story rearranging. "So, Sora knows about my mother. She figured it out 2 days after the gala. This framing, the revenge, it's not only jealousy, it's guilt. Her family's fingerprints all over your mother's exploitation. She's trying to erase you before the truth circles back to her." The camera light blinked. Dahi moved toward the door. "I can't stay, but I emailed you everything. The recordings, the photos, all of it. Check your spam folder." 2 minutes later, real police stepped in to resume questioning, but within the hour, Jung's lawyers secured Leonora's release on condition she surrender her passport. She walked out into the arrivals hall, and Jung was there waiting. The look on his face cracked something in her. Not anger, disappointment. "I didn't do it," Leonora said. "I know," Jung replied, handing her his phone. "My security team enhanced the footage. The person who planted the documents was wearing a ring, visible in one frame, custom made. My head of security recognized it. It belongs to Sora's assistant." "So you believe me?" "I chose evidence over assumption," Jung said. He stepped closer. "I spent 15 years married, afraid to trust my instincts, afraid to fight when it counted. I'm done with that." They stood in the middle of arrivals, travelers streaming past, and Jung lifted his hands to her face, careful, like she was worth protecting. "I believe you," he said. "I'm with you. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Then he kissed her, under harsh lights, with strangers watching, and it tasted like defiance and relief. Leonora kissed him back, gripping his shirt, letting herself feel safe for the first time in days. They didn't see Sora standing 30 feet away by the coffee stand, watching footage on Dahi's phone that captured this exact moment. Didn't see her face fracture into grief and fury and recognition. Sora stood there a moment longer, then lifted her phone and made a call. "I need to schedule a press conference. Tomorrow. National coverage. Every major outlet." "Ma'am, what are you planning?" Dahi asked beside her, still performing loyalty. "What I should have done years ago," Sora said. "Tell the truth." The press conference was set for 2 p.m. at the Plaza Hotel. Jung and Leonora watched the announcement on the news from his Gangnam apartment, both hollow-eyed after a night without sleep. "She's going to expose everything," Leonora said. "Your father's theft, my investigation. She's burning it all down." Jung didn't argue. He only pulled Leonora closer. "Then we'll handle it." At 1:55 p.m., they watched the live broadcast, Leonora's grip tight on Jung's hand. when Sora stepped to the podium in a sharp black suit. Every major Korean outlet was there. International press, too. "Good afternoon," Sora began, voice steady. "I've called you here to make a confession regarding art fraud and exploitation involving both the Eom and Han family legacies." "Here it comes," Leonora whispered. But then Sora said something neither of them anticipated. "My mother, Han Ji-soo, worked as an art broker in London in the early 1990s. During that period, she participated in contracts that exploited vulnerable artists, particularly immigrant artists, women artists, artists of color. One of those artists was a black British woman named Octavian Blackwood." The room erupted with flashes and questions. Sora waited. Octavian Blackwood created extraordinary work that was purchased for a fraction of its worth and stripped of attribution. She died, believing she had failed. She died poor and forgotten, while her paintings sold for millions. My mother witnessed those contracts. My mother enabled them. And I, Sora's voice fractured slightly, I spent the last week trying to destroy the woman seeking justice for her mother's legacy instead of helping her. On the couch, Leonora forgot how to breathe. Therefore, Sora continued, the Han Foundation will establish a full retrospective of Octavian Blackwood's work. All attribution rights will be returned to her estate. Full restitution will be paid to her family for 30 years of stolen revenue, and I'm resigning from the Foundation's board, effective immediately. The press room erupted. Sora didn't react. I spent my marriage protecting a man who never protected me. I spent my career protecting my family's name at any cost. No more. She looked straight into the camera. And Leonora knew she was looking at Jung. I don't need anyone to save me. I never did. Then she left the stage. Backstage, in a private room, Sora sat alone and focused on breathing. The press conference had lasted 12 minutes. In 12 minutes, she'd destroyed her family's reputation, crippled the Foundation's credibility, and made herself untouchable in Seoul's elite circles. And she felt lighter than she had in years. The door opened. Dahi walked in, already crying. I sent them everything, Dahi said. Leonora and Jung, all the evidence of what you asked me to do. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I couldn't keep. Sora lifted a hand. I know. I've known since you visited Leonora in airport detention. Dahi froze. You knew. You're not as subtle as you think when you disable security cameras. Sora almost smiled. And you're fired, obviously. But she pulled an envelope from her bag. You're also hired as the new director of the Octavian Blackwood retrospective project. The Foundation will need someone with an actual conscience to run it. Dahi took the envelope with unsteady hands. Ma'am, I don't understand. Sora stood, straightened her suit, ready to step back into a ruined name and a future she'd never mapped. You helped me choose what was right, even when I was committed to choosing wrong. That earns trust, not punishment. 2 weeks later, Leonora received an email with a Seoul return address. No name, only coordinates. Jeju Island, South Coast, near Seogwipo, and a message. It's time. Come alone. This is insane, Jung said, when she showed him. Obviously, a trap. Or its answers, Leonora said. The contact who'd warned her, pushed her, tried to shield her, had gone quiet after Sora's conference. This was the first word in 2 weeks. Then, I'm coming with you. They flew to Haeju on an early flight, rented a car, followed the coastal road until the coordinates led them to a small studio carved into a cliff above the sea. The kind of place that existed only if you knew it was there. The door stood open. Inside, the room was alive with paintings. Dozens covering walls, stacked against chairs, leaning wherever space allowed. The style was unmistakable, more mature, more controlled, but undeniably familiar. The same command of light, the same fearless color. And in the corner, standing at an easel with a brush in her hand, paint darkening her fingers, was an elderly black woman with silver locks and eyes Leonora knew from photographs. Octavian Blackwood, alive. Leonora's legs buckled. Jung caught her, held her steady, but she couldn't look away from the impossible figure across the room. "Hello, my baby," Octavian said, voice exactly as Leonora remembered from 4-year-old memories she'd always feared were imagined. "Hello, my brilliant, furious, beautiful girl." "You're dead," Leonora whispered. "You died. I went to your funeral. I saw the certificate. I disappeared," Octavian said softly. "That's not the same thing." Then she told them everything. London, October 1995. Octavian Blackwood broke and emptied out. Standing on Southwark Bridge at 3 in the morning, ready to step forward. She'd been evicted, her daughter temporarily placed with her sister. And she'd just learned the paintings she sold to survive were hanging in Seoul galleries for £50,000 apiece while she couldn't buy food. A car had stopped. A Korean woman stepped out. Han Ji-soo, older, polished, eyes heavy with guilt. "Please don't," Ji-soo had said. "Please." "You knew," Octavian had answered. "You watched him steal from me. You signed it." "I did. I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm offering a choice." Ji-soo proposed the unthinkable. "Come to Korea. Vanish. I'll fake your death, build you a new identity, give you money to begin again. A studio in Jeju, time to paint without hunger. Freedom from an art world that refused to see you." "My daughter," Octavian had said. "She'll be safe with your sister. She'll grow strong. And one day, when she's ready, when she can fight battles you can't, you'll find each other again. But tonight, you need to live." Octavian took the offer, let herself die on paper, while she flew to a country she'd never imagined. She painted for 28 more years in obscurity, this time by will, and she waited for her daughter to be ready. "I've been watching you," Octavian said now, tears spilling freely. "For years, I hired investigators to keep track, to make sure you were safe. When you began digging into my old work, when you started planning this mission, I knew. I hired Dahi to keep an eye on you in Seoul, to protect you. You knew everything." Leonora could barely get the words out. "All this time, I needed you to be strong enough to carry this story, to fight for it when I couldn't." Octavian stepped closer. "I was shattered back then, baby. I let them erase me because I believed them when they said I wasn't worth defending. But you're everything I failed to be. Strong and relentless and unwilling to disappear quietly." Leonora crossed the studio in 3 steps and fell into her mother's arms, and they both broke apart. 28 years of grief and loss pouring out while the ocean roared below, and Jung stood witness to a reunion that rewrote everything. And that, more than money or fame or restoration, was the real restitution, the future, at last, paying back the past. Before you go, one small thing. This story, Leonora's, Octavian's, isn't unusual. Even now, artists are still being exploited, erased, and quietly written out by systems that reward power and overlook vulnerability. Stories like these only travel when people decide they're worth passing on. So, if this one stayed with you, even briefly, subscribing or sharing helps it reach further. It tells the platform there's room for stories about stolen legacies and restored names, that's all. Thank you for watching. Some stains don't destroy things. Some stains expose what was always there, waiting to be noticed. If you want more stories like this, stories that touch the heart and bring about justice too, hit that subscribe button. A new story drops soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, your voice matters. Use it.